Hello, everyone. I'm Loretta McNary, and I'm here to welcome you to Halfway Done and to lunch provided by Fedex. And I'm going to bring next to the stage Justin Troy. He is the sourcing director with Fedex, who I said sponsored today's lunch. I hope you will enjoy him and enjoy your lunch, and you'll enjoy the rest of the day as well. I promise you. Thank you.
And good afternoon. It's definitely my pleasure to be here, and I want to welcome all of you for joining us today. As you heard, with Fedex, and we're proud to continue our sponsorship of this event and proud of our long-standing working relationship with Joselle and her team at the Mid-South Minority Business Council Continuum. As we think about it, small business is the engine for economic growth in the country. And Fedex is committed to continuing to support programs that are helping small businesses grow and thrive. Most of you know, Fedex is one of the country's leading multinational corporations with over 570,000 team members across the globe and approximately 30,000 of them right here in our hometown, Memphis. Small businesses are critical to the success of Fedex, not only as customers, but also as suppliers and vendors as well. In 2020, Fedex spent more than $13 billion for products and services supplied by diverse, minority, women-owned, and other small businesses in the U.S. Here's just a few ways Fedex supports the growth and development of small businesses. We support and are actively involved with the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council, National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and the National Veteran-Owned Business Association. And locally, Fedex supports organizations such as the Black Business Association of Memphis, the Mid-South Latino Chamber of Commerce, Epicenter, the Memphis Area Chamber of Commerce, the 800 Initiative, and many others. Fedex is committed to being a good corporate citizen, and that includes investing in programs like this one that help to improve the communities where our team members live and work. It's an investment in the future of our city that we hope will benefit all of us, not just Fedex. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Tom Kaden has been with Mallory Alexander International Logistics for 25 years. Mallory Alexander is a leading full-service logistics provider. They support manufacturers, retailers, and other suppliers in the storage and shipment of their valuable cargo, and they've been doing that for more than 90 years. For the last 4 years, Tom has been the Chief Operating Officer responsible for all operations across the entire network of 15 domestic offices and 3 offices in Asia. Before assuming the COO role, Tom established the northbound and southbound cross-border transportation, distribution, and U.S.-Mexico customs operations in Laredo, Texas. Before joining Mallory, Tom spent 15 years working for other international transportation and logistics companies. His career includes 4 years with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency on the Mexican and Canadian borders and 4 years of military service. Welcome, Tom, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Troy and Justin, for a very complimentary introduction to the program. Joselle, I appreciate the invitation, and thank you to all of the participants that are joining the program today. Joselle has asked me to speak to everyone about how COVID-19 has affected the supply chain, and I'm going to do that now and talk for a few minutes about what's going on with the supply chain and what's the direct impact to that. Can everybody see the screen up? I want to make sure we don't have any technical problems. Troy, can you see the screen?
Yes, Tom.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just want to make sure we were up. So the question really exists, how COVID-19 changed the global supply chain and the global supply chain management. You know, the supply chain as it exists today is fragmented, confused, overburdened, overcapacitated, And there's many challenges in the supply chain, and I'll speak to those challenges as we move through the presentation. One of the things that I'm going to do here is speak to participants that have no experience in the international transportation or supply chain arena. So if you're very experienced out there, please forgive me for getting at the very basic granular level of the issues that exist today. So what's driving the supply chain disruption? And in our world, it's simply consumer demand. There is more cargo moving from Asia to the US than there is the capacity to handle those shipments, those ocean containers. And the replenishment as a result of COVID-19, the replenishment of the stores, people's buying power has overwhelmed the supply chain in 2021. And when we get through these slides, you'll get a better picture of what that looks like and what the net impacts are to an importer that's moving goods from Asia, particularly from Asia, into the United States. So what is a container ship? This is a couple of pictures, as you see, of ocean containers, 20-foot and 40-foot containers on a vessel, stacked 12, 15, 20-foot high, or 20 containers high. And I wanted to give the folks that have never seen a container ship some perspective of how goods are moving on a ship from Asia into the United States, or from any other parts of the world into the United States. So let's take a look at the statistics, and I use the Port of Long Beach as a good example of the volume increases. So the loaded inbound containers in 2020 coming through the Port of Long Beach was 1,659,969 compared to 2,315,000, or a 39.5% increase. The outbound containers, which are exported containers moving out of the Port of Long Beach, had a minor increase. And then the empties going back, empty containers going back to fulfill orders to be loaded in the foreign ports increased about 14%. And the inbound containers. The empties outbound increased 65%. So what this really tells you is, as a container is emptied by a US importer, the steamship companies prefer to take that back, typically to Asia empty, so they can quickly turn that piece of equipment around and bring a revenue-paying load of substantial proportions back to the United States. So these are some of the numbers over the Port of Long Beach that show a significant volume increase that's being handled through that particular port. Yeah, you can magnify these numbers when you start looking at all of the ports on the West Coast, whether it's Oakland, Seattle, Tacoma area, and when you add those numbers, it's a significant volume increase into a supply chain that doesn't have infinite resource. Just for the sake of edification for the participants out there, our top trading partners for imports by TEUs are 20-foot equivalent units. 20-foot equivalent unit is 2 20-foots equal 1 40-foot. And our the way we talk about ocean freight and container volume is in 20-foot equivalent units. China is our #1 trading partner, and Vietnam is #2. And you see the list as it's ranked there, which will show you where predominantly the volume of inbound cargo was coming from, China being the primary import partner, followed by Vietnam. These are top trading partners for exports by 20-foot equivalent units. Again, China is at the top of the list. Vietnam falls to number 5. South Korea is number 2. So you can see the list here of the top export countries that we partner with. Some of the top commodities that are imported, obviously crude oil takes number 1, and that's typically in what we call bulk tankers and not in containers, but it is the number 1 import commodity in the United States. Electronics, plastics, furniture, and clothing fill out the top 5 imported commodities. So let's talk about what happens in the congestion. So this slide speaks to the vessels at anchorage, and what that means is as the vessel transits the Pacific Ocean and arrives in Long Beach, it cannot be immediately unloaded. So it's sitting out in the ocean waiting for a space to berth the vessel. And in 2021, there were 38 vessels waiting for berth on a weekly average. That fluctuated week to week throughout 2021, but a significant number of vessels there that were waiting to be unloaded. There wasn't enough capacity and enough people within the Port of Long Beach, as an example, to unload these ships in a timely manner, which created a significant delay in getting the containers on the ground in Los Angeles for transit, either to Memphis or some other location. The average time was 7 to 8 days waiting for a slot to dock the ship. And what this did and still does today is it delays, or excuse me, it leads to voided sailings. Voided sailings means that they canceled the next ship's rotation. So that ship is going back and forth between Asia and the US typically. And so when there's a long lead time, it's sitting out waiting on a berth, it's not meeting its scheduled departure time, its scheduled arrival time, and consequently, these ship rotations, these schedules, they institute a voided sailing. So they essentially cancel the next ship's rotation. So what does that do? That reduces the capacity to move additional cargo in a timely manner from Asia back to the US. So for every issue out there in the supply chain, there's a direct correlation that creates another issue and tends to magnify itself as it moves along. So this is just one example of what happens when there's delays in unloading the vessel, and it then takes another ship out of the rotation for that particular month, which reduces the capacity to move additional containers. And so the backlog in Asia, in the ports, in the warehouses, and at the shippers' facilities continues to grow. So this will show you a little bit about what's going on in ocean freight pricing from the West Coast. So if you look at this graph, and in particular, look at the gray line that you see here, ocean freight pricing has continued to escalate to the West Coast. It's really no longer $8,500. It's gone well beyond that now. And I'll give you an example. I know of some customers today that are paying $20,000 a container from Asia to Memphis when they were paying $3,800 15, 16 months ago, 18 months ago. So the supply and demand has greatly affected the pricing. There's more demand than there is supply or ship capacity, which has created a rate escalation for an importer or shipper that is moving cargo into the United States. And I don't think in the long term this is sustainable. our economy, I don't know, can handle $20,000 freight bills in the future, but it seems every time I look, the rate goes higher and higher and higher. So you can see where it was back in second quarter 2018, third quarter 2018 to the West Coast, and then in second quarter 2020, third quarter of 2020, the rates just continued to elevate. And I don't know where it's going to stop at this point in time. But a significant cost factor to the merchandise, which obviously has a trickle-down effect to the consumer. They're going to pay more for the goods that are imported as a result. So the same graph, but this is to the East Coast. It's taken a little bit larger spike here on the gray line. First quarter of 2021 continues to increase. Again, we're looking at $20,000 number to Memphis over the East Coast, but significant increases in the cost of transportation as a result of the demand, which was triggered by the lockdown as a result of COVID-19. So for an importer out there that is looking to import cargo, they typically had a lead time that they had factored into their ordering. And these are the general incremental steps that we would see in the process of booking cargo for a slot on a ship all the way through to delivery. And our graph shows 4 to 5 weeks was the typical time needed to move cargo. We're 8 to 9 weeks, and this is into the West Coast, by the way. And then if it's coming IPI, which is the intermodal move into Memphis, we're saying you need to add another 35 days to that. So it's a significant increase in lead time when you're ordering merchandise for delivery anywhere in the United States. So let's talk a little bit about what's driving some of these supply chain problems that exist. Vessel bunching at the ports, meaning there's too many vessels in the port, they can't unload them fast enough. That's obviously triggering a dwell time for the ships that are at anchorage outside of the marine terminals, waiting for a slot or a berth to dock. And that is a challenge right now. Congested marine terminals, and I would really say here, congested airports as well, and congested truck lines. Anybody that operates in the supply chain as a supplier has congestion. So, and I don't care whether it's FedEx, UPS, or any number of airlines, we're seeing significant congestion. And I give you a quick case study in Chicago at the airport there. There is cargo sitting in the airport facility waiting to be moved to the respective delivery point that's been sitting there since mid-June. It hasn't even been worked, as we call it. It's still sitting on the airline pallets or in the airline containers, and they're struggling to manage that. And that has to do with shortage of skilled equipment operators, skilled labor to be able to handle that. And as recently, there was about 700 workers that were with COVID in Long Beach, which created part of the problem in getting these ships unloaded. So COVID and the infections that exist continue to be a problem with companies that are trying to provide a service in the supply chain, whether it's a steamship company, a truck line, an airline, or a warehouse operator. These are challenges that exist. Chassis shortages, and for the people that are not in the know, the chassis is the set of wheels that the box sits on and moves around on. That equipment is in short supply. So even if the container arrives, let's say in Memphis on the railroad, chassis shortages prevent us from picking it up and making a timely delivery in many cases. Shipping lines are not transferring the containers to the off-port rail terminals on a timely basis. So as these containers stack up on the ground in big blocks of containers, getting that transferred to railroads for transit inland is very difficult at the present time. All of the distribution facilities, and when I say all, I really mean 99% of them, are filled to capacity, and they are experiencing warehouse labor shortages. And some of that is a byproduct of the stimulus packages that affect labor. So, and then some carriers, ocean carriers, are implementing a $5,000 congestion surcharge in the ports of Long Beach and Seattle. So what they're really saying is I don't want to take it there. And if I do, in addition to the freight, I'm going to put out a $5,000 surcharge. So they're trying to dissuade the importers from using the ports of Long Beach and Seattle as a result of the problems. Another example is Union Pacific Railroad, which carries a lot of the cargo into Memphis from the West Coast. They have presented an embargo on taking additional containers to Chicago. Chicago is so congested in the rail facility, they're not taking any. And they've indicated that this will go on for at least another week, and who knows how long after that. So they've got to clear out the backlog in their facilities in Chicago. And it would not surprise me that there's not some embargo at some point into Memphis. Presently, the railroads are handling it, but it's slow, time consuming, and expensive. So that's some of the points that I wanted to raise relative to foreign and domestic port congestion. The port of Yantian, China, had a partial closure in April. Many of their people were out with COVID, and it created a problem in that port as well. There are issues with truckers in China moving equipment from the supplier to the port. So one problem creates another, and it builds on those long list of problems and until it gets delivered. So I say the supply chain's in crisis management. Every day in our organization, we struggle with finding the cargo. Where is it? Who lost it? How do we find it? And it's really crisis management. It's taking us as a service provider a lot of extra time that we don't normally spend handling a shipment to service our customers. And the supply chain is so difficult. We as a company, and many companies like us, have decided to not take on any additional customers. We're trying to service the ones that we have and that have been loyal. And I think many of the other freight forwarders and warehouses feel the same. And so it's a daily struggle to do that. Pricing is kind of out the window there. If you want to move your cargo, there's not a lot of price negotiation. It's the race is to get on the vessel. So it's almost a daily negotiation about how much it's going to cost to get that container on the vessel in Shanghai or elsewhere. And so people that don't want to pay the $15,000 or $20,000 number, they're, as a general rule, their cargo is sitting and waiting in China for an opportunity to get it on board. But a major retailer, as I said earlier, committed to $20,000 a container over July and August. So what we have also said here, and it's important to understand, and a lot of people don't, these containers get stuck in a stack of containers, a sea of containers on the ground, and getting them out of that stack and moved, or even finding them is very difficult, or they get lost in transit. So these are some of the challenges that we experience every day in the supply chain, trying to manage the crisis that we have. So what's the impact on Memphis, really? Obviously, higher costs for all importers in the Mid-South region, whether it's ocean freight, air freight, and all of these transportation providers' rates have gone up substantially in many cases, and their service level has gone down because their infrastructure is constrained by the pure excess volume or additional volume that's been inducted into the supply chain. Once the cargo arrives in Memphis, we're happy about that, and we get to rejoice that it's even here after many weeks of trying to get it moved. Then we have to deal with this equipment issue, whether it's a local drayman and they're over capacity. So when can you pick it up and make a delivery? Is there a chassis available to put the box on? And then driver shortages also play into getting cargo moved once it arrives here. And it's important to note that many of these constraints that are in the supply chain add additional cost to an importer, whether it's demurrages that exist for letting the container sit at the railroad, or whatever it is that has constrained the cargo from moving timely, still adds cost to an importer above and beyond the ocean freight, and probably in some cases more than they care to bear. Obviously, extended transit time, higher costs we talked about. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good news for Memphis importers that it's going to get better anytime soon. We're going to get into the Christmas season, and when we get into Christmas season, we induct more volume into the supply chain, and that's going to further create downstream problems that we have to deal with in order to service a customer. So that's a little bit about what's going on in the supply chain. The original question, what's created it? It's a high demand from the consumer base on products that they want to buy in the retail stores, and that pure volume has overwhelmed the entire supply chain. So that's a little bit about what's going on. I'll take questions that the participants might have on this topic. Okay, Kathy has opened up a question. Are you seeing an improvement in the status of workers in the ports now that we have had some reopening of the workplaces, and how that is impacting cost and delays? You know, we're seeing some slight improvement, but it's almost not measurable, really, in the big scheme of things. And of course, all of these variants with COVID continue to impact the workforce, whether it's in Memphis or Los Angeles or Shanghai. So I don't really see a major improvement working at this point in time with the supply chain, and the cost, I think, will continue to probably escalate as we get into the Christmas season. because there's a finite number of ships in this service. And if the demand exceeds their capacity, the price is going to go up. So if you induct additional Christmas volume, I would expect to see ocean freight pricing continue to rise.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for that presentation. A lot of information for people to think about. There are a lot of conversations around the country where supply chain questions are coming about. It's becoming the new hot and sexy topic that everybody's talking about. A lot of people don't really understand the supply chain and the issues and the impacts that it has on day-to-day life. I thank you for the question we've received so far. My hope is that as we continue on, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, kind of continue our conversation, and in hopes that if others have questions, that they will enter them into the chat or into the Q&A. One of the things that I found interesting, it almost reminded me of, this visual where you see a dog chasing its tail. And that was when you talked about, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but you talked about the workforce shortage. You talked about as a result, and then you also talked about the workforce shortage driving, the pandemic driving demand. And with the workforce shortage, the workforce shortage is not driving demand, but due to the workforce shortage and the result of the pandemic, now we have all this congestion because demand has exceeded supply. But then when I thought about it, and the more you talked, then you talked about, depending on where the goods are coming from, the other impacts that it has up and down the supply chain. There's a lot of construction activity going on here in Memphis, and there's conversations with contractors in various trades about different materials that are needed for these construction activities. And so what I thought about when you talked about the increased cost of containers, and it's really about the race to get the container on the vessel. Are you all seeing any strategies in the movement of supplies around industries? And so with all of the construction activity going on here in Memphis, is there any way for, builders or contractors or even developers to collaborate if there's material that we're trying to bring into the country, and if we can all get it on, if they can get the bulk of that material on one container, would that help us in this supply chain issue with certain types of materials?
That's an interesting question. And I would say, and I see this in my world, when we build warehouses around the country, there's shortages of steel. The prices have gone up on steel. I was in the dry cleaners the other day, and I was talking to the lady, and I asked her, has she seen price escalation? And she said, you wouldn't believe what a coat hanger increase has been in the last few months. So their cost is even escalated just trying to hang the garment and deliver it to the consumer. I'm not sure that I fully understand your question, but I think that there's very little opportunity for, let's say, a steel importer of any small size to be able to do much to manage the supply chain in a better way or a better facet. And now we, as an example, we are now working with other companies to charter vessels. And if you can have enough capacity to support a charter where you're dedicated a full ship to a certain customer base, then that may provide some relief to the marketplace. But truthfully, there's so much volume that even if we charter a vessel, it really doesn't change the congestion as I see it. It's still got to be handled in the Port of Long Beach or the Port of Seattle or the Port of Oakland. That problem still exists. So We might move it faster by having a chartered ship that's dedicated to customers, but really there's still a downstream problem when it gets to the port, when it gets to a truck line to take it inland, or a railroad to take it inland. So I don't see a lot of opportunity for an importer to change that. Even in the charter situation, the number is still $18,000 for freight. We just might be able to move it faster, and then you can select your own port of call. So there's some things that can be done, but by and large, you're dependent upon a workforce in the ports to unload the ship, whether it's a chartered ship or a public ship.
So what I've heard you say is that the issue is, it's a workforce issue all up and down the supply chain, from the port to getting containers to container yards, from container yards on the back of either rail or trucks, then getting them moved to their point, the destination point. And if they have to go to another container yard, all of this is being, this impact is all because of workforce. And so that's basically what we're saying.
Workforce is part of it, but just the pure congestion that's in the supply chain that a supplier, a vendor has to deal with. And once you exceed the normal capacity for whether it's an airline or an ocean carrier or a truck line, once you exceed that normal capacity, you start to back up and create delays, whether it's the final mile delivery or whether it's the ocean transportation. And of course, the bridge problem in Memphis certainly hasn't helped, moving cargo in a timely manner, but that's not the biggest problem that exists to move cargo into Memphis.
Very good. I think we have another question in the chat. What is it?
Yes, the question reads, even if businesses are sourcing products within the US, the ability to move products from one place to another seems to be getting more difficult all the time with driver shortage. What do you think the long-term future is for moving goods within the US?
I'm not as close to that as some others might be, but my view of it is it doesn't get better. There's a finite number of truck drivers, and I think every year there becomes less and less drivers that want to be on the road moving product from New York to Los Angeles. So I don't think that the outlook is optimistic, and I think it's going to continue to be a problem. And it's also, obviously, the rates have gone up, the rates of pay to the truck line, to the trucker itself, and corresponding with the truck line has gone up to try to retain drivers in the marketplace to move cargo. But truthfully, I don't see that getting better anytime soon. And in terms of a long-term prognosis, it's been difficult in times past, and I really don't think that it gets much better.
Okay.
There
I think
may
we
be-
have,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Joseph.
no, continue.
There may be certain pockets that get better, but in the general sense of moving cargo within the United States, I think there's less and less people that want to be on the road 6 days a week. And I just don't see that it's going to change much.
All right. Thank you for that response. I think someone has their hand up. We're going to see if we can allow them to ask a question or if they'll have to type it in the chat. We'll see.
Tom, you really did an absolutely incredible job presenting the overall situation. for what's going on. But I think it's not just on the supply side of the problem. I think it's the greed involved. Since we've been bringing containers, 300, 400, 500 containers a year in China, and our price per pound shipping material from China to Memphis was 8 cents a pound. Today, it's 60 cents a pound, plus the 25% tariff, plus the 28% increase in steel prices in China. So it's really have created a significant problem on a supply side of it, which I'll elaborate a little later in the other part of the presentation. But one of the things that concerned me, Tom, that you saying that things not going to get better, and we are projecting things going to get better at the end of the year because they have so many companies have started the business in China to lower the rate to supply to the United States market. That one of the things that have created a problem is Home Depot, Lowe's, Hobby Lobby, and automobile manufacturers, because Home Depot is willing to pay $23,000 a container for priority container because their margin is just absolutely outrageous. So they are taking the Hobby Lobby, Home Depot, Lowe's are taking all of these majority the priority containers out of China. So I mean, I think you kind of really provided a really insight of what's going on globally, not just in China, not only in Asia, but India has the same problem. We import material from China, some about 300, 400, 500 containers a year. We'll be lucky if we can get about 100 containers this year. We got 66 containers sitting at the factory currently. So anyway, you've done an extremely job, and I thank you so much.
Pravin, thank you. Thank you for that question. I'm really happy that we've had participation in this session today from both sides of the table, also from Tom and from Mallory International. Your insight, thank you for bringing this information to us, this perspective. My hope is that it has opened the eyes of many of us, lay people, I will say, in the marketplace that are not involved in the supply chain day to day, but also to help if there are corporations represented on this call that have orders for material, they're hearing from their suppliers about the delays. You have people that are in the construction industry that are either a contractor or a subcontractor, and they are quoting jobs and are really struggling with the short lead times that they're being given as they try to put their bids together, which is causing them to have to mitigate the risk that they could face as a contractor by not being able to secure a firm price for material based on where we are in this country right now, to consumers, just individuals that are not on either side of the purchasing and buying corporate part of the equation, but everyday consumers. As we go to the grocery stores, as we go to all types of establishments for consumer goods and the like, and we're seeing increased prices, but what we hear is it's a result of supply chain issues or supply chain disruption. So Tom, I want to thank you and your coworkers there at Mallory International for pulling this together for us, helping us to really understand the issues that are going on in the marketplace. We thank you for the work that you all do day in and day out, navigating these packages and vessels and containers all across the country, bringing them here into Memphis to be distributed to the rest of the world. So again, thank you all for participating in this session today. While this session is ending, there is a lot ahead. Starting at 1 p.m., we start our workshops. And as you recall, there are 4 tracks to our workshop. There's a corporate track, there's a community track, there's a B2B track, and a B2C track. There are workshops from 1 o'clock to 1:50, 2 o'clock to 2:50, and 3 o'clock to 3:50. I urge you to look across the tracks based on your interests, based on the business that you're in, and that you connect track to track so that you have a full track railway. If we use the rail scenario, that all of the tracks are connected so that you can continue successfully on your journey and you're not derailed. So there are a number of things that are going to be discussed over the course of this afternoon of specific interest to corporations and corporate representatives, to minority and women-owned businesses, to the consumer market, and to the general community. I urge you to stay with us, to come back to the auditorium. We're going to start up in about 6 minutes and visit each of the tracks. If your workshop ends early, go back to the exhibit hall, look at the booths. Don't forget the leaderboard. We have wonderful prizes that are going to be awarded. And by all means, come back tomorrow morning. So I'll see you in and around a workshop this afternoon as we start our workshops from 1 until, and they end at 4 o'clock today. Thank you.